Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Alfa Romeo Driver podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and this month management team member David Faithfull and I witter on for the best part of an hour about the state of the UK charging network, domestic electricity prices, the economics of operating a motorway service station, whether or not driving enjoyment declines with age, and, when we remember, the new Alfa Romeo Junior. To be fair, it's mostly about the Junior. Good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon, Guy.
It seems like a long time since we did our impromptu live podcast after the launch of the vehicle that we at the time called the Milano.
Yeah, how long has it been? It's only about 2 weeks, isn't it?
It seems like months and months and months.
A lot has changed, actually.
A lot has changed, yeah. So one of the things we said in that podcast is that we would come back together a couple of weeks later and have a more considered view and talk about what else we knew that we didn't know at the time. And one of those things is we now know that the Milano is not the Milano.
It's not called Milano. In fact, it was only called Milano for a very short period of time, wasn't it? A day or 48 hours?
Yeah, 48 hours, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Junior has got a lot of history and heritage with Alfa Romeo, so I don't dislike the name at all. I think the first Junior was in the 65, 66, the 1300 GT Junior. And of course, Junior was the project name for the Mito, a undeniably spectacular Alfa Romeo. So, yeah, it was just an odd thing, though, wasn't it? There was this elation following the launch, and I thought the launch was really well managed. And then it all sort of quickly came off the rails, didn't it? In a quite a public way.
Yeah, and over a period of a few hours after the announcement till the 2 days later when the name was changing. So the story, as far as we can see, is that an Italian industry minister, apparently not even the Italian industry minister, but a junior minister in the Department for Industry called Adolfo Orso, claimed that it violated a law that's supposed to stop you putting Italian flags and logos that look a bit like the boot shape of Italy and stuff like that onto products that aren't Italian, in order to protect Italian products.
Yeah, which seems like a worthy law to have. Nothing
it does.
That in principle.
It does. Stellantis seem pretty convinced that they're not breaking it. And it's interesting that the focus is suddenly on Milano when, Fiat have been building cars in Ticci since 1970, an awful long time, and nobody's apparently batted an eyelid. And given what the law was supposed to protect, the Fiat 600e actually has an Italian flag on the boot, and again, nobody seems to have batted an eyelid about that. It does appear that this was a way to apply pressure on Stellantis, hoping that they would back down and make the car in Italy.
The craziness I thought was that at the launch, it wasn't suddenly announced this car's being built outside of Italy. That's been known for years. So this is not some new thing that's just happened, is it? It feels like the Italian minister, whoever it was, basically didn't really have their act together, because this is like 3-year-old news that it's going to be built in Ticci.
Yeah. Well, and even the combination of the name and the production. If you go back to the naming announcement, it said in the press release when the name was announced in January or whenever it was that it was going to be built in Ticci.
Yeah, because we all thought it was. Yeah, there was that whole live press announcement that was embargoed, and we did a live podcast then, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
The Brunero, and could have been other names, and they were linking images of maps and things like that for us to try and work out what it was going to be. And then it was, fair play to them, a bit of a surprise. It was going to be called Milano when they announced that. So, but yeah, that was months ago as well. So it does seem odd the day after the world premiere of the car that the Italian government kick off about it. But
Imperato's response, I thought, was brilliant. We're not going to play politics if you don't want us to use that name. We've got another name lined up.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so. The whole debacle, bit embarrassing, but I think the way Alfa managed it, or Imperato particularly, he sort of took a view of, okay, you don't like that, that's no problem. And in fact, I think the press release did say, don't like the name, fine, here's Junior. And I thought that was a bit of a sort of 2 fingers up, wasn't it, coming from Imperato?
Well, I think that the last paragraph of that press release also thanked the Italian government for all the extra publicity that
extra PR, exactly right. Yeah,
they got from it, which I thought was a bit cheeky. But
they do say no news is bad news if your brand's out there. But I mean, I think it was one of those comedy moments that most people will forget about quite quickly. But for us, Alfisti, who were in the thick of it, it was like, what the hell's going on? And then you sort of, truthfully, all of us who got the press releases and got all the images, every sodding image had the word Milano on the front number plate. And so we went to press with that, with our magazine. Everybody went to press with that. And then it was days and days and days before any photos start emerging with the word Junior on it or with an Italian plate. So it was the sort of the cleanup process, I suppose, that caused us and everybody a lot of faff. But
yeah, and there have been conspiracy theories that suggested that Alfa always knew that the government were going to do this and that Junior wasn't a quick decision. It was something that they'd always planned to provoke the government by calling it Milano and know they'd have to change it. But as you say, I think the amount of time that it took them to reshoot the cars with Junior number plates, if that had been the case, all of that stuff would have been, shot and ready to go. And when they said, okay, we've changed the name, there would have been a new set of photos. And
yeah, of course. I think, there's certainly no conspiracy there. I think it was a chaotic whirlwind of 24 hours, I'm sure, at Alfa Romeo head office. But I don't think there's any long-term damage. A number of us, Alfa Romeo enthusiasts, and a number of the press may remember it, but largely people will move on from it and will forget it all happened. I do think, yes, our latest magazine is probably a collector's item now. Because it wouldn't surprise me if during the course of the next 6 months, all online versions of the photography with the name Milano start disappearing and you can't find any. So download them today if you want your collection.
I have a full set. Just while we're on the name, I mean, the reaction to it's been interesting. I can't prove this because it was a private conversation on WhatsApp, but the day before the name announcement, I had a discussion with the PR manager at Alfa. And I said, don't think it's going to be Brennero. I think that's a bluff. I think it's going to be Junior. And she said, no, it won't be Junior. So I'm quite chuffed with that. The interesting amongst Alfisti, I've seen a few people say Junior doesn't make sense because the thing about the GT Junior was that it was a Giulia, but smaller engined. So it was a junior version of the Giulia, and this isn't a junior version of anything. And there's a certain validity to that. And it's been used as it was a junior version of the 146, I think. And then the other thing that I've heard said is that people who don't understand the Alfa history, which, as we've already said on this podcast, is a big part of who this vehicle is aimed at, people who aren't Alfisti.
Yeah.
Will look at Junior and think it's an odd name and kind of undersells the car and makes it sound like a baby car, a cheap and cheerful, not to be taken seriously car. I'm not sure it makes any difference. I mean, there have been some cars with terrible names that have sold really well.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make any difference. I mean, I think it does make it slightly incumbent on the dealers, on the retail network to, I think, as part of the sales process, sell potential customers the heritage of the brand and our racing history. And certain part of that is the name Junior. So, I mean, look, if you're going to walk into a Stellantis and Me dealer that's selling Peugeots, Fiats, Jeeps and Alfas, and you get a sort of a generic sales experience where they show you a Peugeot and an Avenger and a Junior, you may not get it. You can see that the name might sway some sorts of customers. But I think if you're going into a really good Alfa Romeo dealer, they are not just trying to sell you the car. They're trying to sell you its history, its heritage, that you'll be not just buying a motor vehicle, you're buying into the history and the legacy that's been created by the brand over 120 plus years. And I think if they do that well, the name is kind of meaningless. And I think I am a bit, you may have heard, I'm quite a fan of the Mito. And the Mito,
you've mentioned it already today.
Oh, have I? Okay. The whole Mito project was the Project Junior. It was going to be called Junior, and it had, I've got images, and there are published images from prototype models and early build models where it was called the Junior, and that changed over time. So I think it's fair enough to call a car the name Junior, and I don't think it's going to adversely affect customer perception based on them not knowing the history. But I do think the retailers need to be, drilling that history home to customers. I think that's part of the sale. That's why you would choose the Alfa over a Peugeot or a Jeep, because of the heritage. It is the same in a Jeep. We visited a Jeep showroom, it must be a year or two ago now, and they just immediately went big on Jeep's history, their legacy, and that was before they started talking to us about the cars. So I don't think it's going to adversely affect it. I hope not. Anyway, it shouldn't do. I don't think it should. I think it's a good name. And
I think on that subject, though, if there's any retailers out there who would like to have a GT Junior or a Junior Zagato in their showroom when they launch the new Junior, then get in touch, and we're sure we can definitely arrange that for you.
Or a Mito Junior.
Yeah, or a 146.
Very special version.
I should have checked on how many left to see if there are any 146 Juniors left, but if there are, one of those.
Yeah.
So that's the name dealt with. I'm a fan, as I said. I think it's what I thought it was going to be called, and I wasn't unhappy with Milano, but I did share some of the Italian government's skepticism that it was an appropriate name, and given that Alfa dropped the Milano name from the Giulietta because it wasn't going to be built at a Racy, I think it was a bold move to give it a go. So onto the car, and we'll do styling last. Let's start with performance and handling first. So on the performance side, we've got 4 powertrains effectively, 2 of which we know quite a lot about, 2 of which we know almost nothing about, and only 1 of which we know for sure we're getting in the UK. So the 4 powertrains are 156 horsepower BEV with a 255 mile maximum range.
Yep.
We have a 240 horsepower BEV, about which we know nothing much other than the fact that with a mechanical LSD in a Bath prototype, you can get the back end out and do some Larry power slides.
Yep.
But pretty much nothing else.
We don't know the range of that then.
And we don't know the range of that. No, and we don't know whether the battery pack is the same technology, same capacity. We don't know any of that. And then there's the 2 Ibrida, I think is the way to pronounce it, the 2 hybrid versions, one of which is, well, they're both the same Peugeot-derived 1.2-litre 3-cylinder engine, but with some significant improvements of late, and a Tonale-style mild hybrid powertrain, so e-motor in the gearbox, giving you a little bit of autonomy around town and crawling in traffic, and maybe brief periods stuck in contraflows on the motorway.
Yep.
And there's a Q4 version of that same powertrain. And again, we know almost nothing about the Q4 version other than that it's coming. And we don't know how the rear wheel drive works, whether that's additional battery packs, and we just know that it's coming.
And the Ibrida, the hybrid version, we still haven't got absolute confirmation that that's definitely coming to the UK, have we?
We do not know. I asked again on the day of recording, and haven't had a response yet. It is being considered. We know that for sure. So it's not that it has been automatically ruled out. I think at one point that would have been the case. So there was certainly a point at which a decision had made that from a certain point, all new Alphas would be pure electric. The fact that it's being considered now means that there's some kind of flexibility there. We know a little bit about that powertrain as well. So again, the moment it was announced, there's lots of people talking about the powertrain there, and the fact that in Peugeot PureTech form, that engine has had some reliability problems caused by a wet belt cam belt system. We're pretty confident that's all changed, don't we?
Yeah, so we think that's now chain. We also, look, that engine, I've only driven one vehicle with that engine as a hire car, and it was quite fun and it was very peppy. So I'm not in the camp of that's a very small engine and that's going to be underpowered. I don't think it will be. That engine also it won Engine of the Year awards, 2 or 3 years running. So it's not a bad engine, but as you say, the wet belt equivalents, they had problems, and our expectation and our belief is this is now a chain solution and it's not the wet belt in the Junior. I think that's a really important point, because I've seen on our social media everyone saying, oh, those wet belts are rubbish and they explode.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's going to be the case now, and I don't think any of the new Peugeots, Jeeps, and Alfa Romeos are using the wet belt technology in that pure tech engine.
Yeah, and just to be fully nerdy, it's an EB2 ADTX engine. There's a couple of other things about it. So I think all of the pure techs are variable valve timing. These higher performance ones are also variable geometry turbos. As I said, it's got the e-motor in the gearbox. It's also a millicycle engine, the same as the engine in the Tonale, which I don't claim to fully understand the technical details, but it does seem to be the preferred way of running a petrol turbo engine in a hybrid.
Yeah.
So certainly looking at the press reports of the hybrid 600E and the hybrid Jeep Avenger, I think that powertrain is quite well thought of.
Yeah.
And actually, again, given some of the criticism that we see of Alfa's products from Alfisti, the benchmark there, or the comparison they're making with the Jeep Avenger hybrid reviews, is to talk about the fact that it uses the same millicycle proper mild hybrid with a kilometre or so of autonomous range that the Tonale uses.
Yeah.
So I think that's a nice interim solution. I'm fascinated to know how the Q4 bit of that works. But
yeah, that'll be interesting because for clarity, then the mild hybrid, it's not like a plug-in hybrid, which you've got 50 miles of electric and another 250 miles of petrol engine. It's the mild hybrid technology is for crawling in traffic, parking your car, getting in and out of supermarkets and so on. So it doesn't have a huge range, but it's on constant charge with the self-charging, and it's there for using in traffic and around town and so on. But it's not like a plug-in where you've got 50 kilometers of electric left.
And there is a lot of confusing terminology around hybrids. So they tend to be divided between hybrids, mild hybrids, and plug-in hybrids.
Mm.
And you go all the way back to the early Priuses. They're a hybrid, so they're self-charging from regeneration, from braking mostly. Can't plug them in, or couldn't in the early days, but have a reasonable amount of range from a biggish battery. Mild hybrids originally were things like the Fiat 500 and Fiat Panda hybrid, where it's a very, very small battery. You basically have no motive power from the battery. You get some torque smoothing from the e-motor, just providing a little bit of extra torque to the petrol engine in use. And because you've got no alternator, effectively the hybrid system is charging the 12-volt battery system as well.
Yeah.
But the Tonale and the Junior kind of fit into a middle ground where they are genuinely hybrids because they have some motive power. So they're not mild hybrids in the way most people use the term, but they're not quite hybrids in the way most people use the term either, because they just have that little bit of a kick and that local emissions friendly ability to not spew out tailpipe emissions in traffic and in car parks and on your own drive and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that is really important, I think, but it comes at a price, obviously. I think if you consider where I live, I'm down on the south coast in Bournemouth, and in the winter it's deserted, and in the summer it's absolutely heaving with tourists. So depending on the time of year, traffic around where I live can be an absolute crawl for several miles just to get into town, out of town, to the shops and so on. So that level of sort of mild hybrid would be very beneficial, I think, from an emissions perspective and from a CO2 protection of the planet perspective when there's a lot of traffic. But I mean, my tiny concern is it's quite a price difference between buying a petrol car and buying that mild hybrid. If that's several £1,000s more for that small benefit, I do get the argument that if everybody had that, it would be an enormous, social benefit. But it's quite a hard sell for people, I think, to invest substantially more on the price of the new car versus just buying a petrol car. And I think it's a harder sell for the retailers versus a plug-in hybrid, where there's clearly, a predefined and likely number of miles range for the electric part, or for the electric motors, without petrol kicking in. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds a bit waffly now. I've said it out loud, but for me personally, I either want a petrol car or I probably want a plug-in hybrid. The problem is the price differential between them is so large. So you start considering a mild hybrid. There's still a substantial enough price differential for not the sort of financial benefits other than, emissions and so on, which is important if you're in a city, Birmingham, Manchester, London, and so on, where they have the regulations. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not fully convinced yet on this mild hybrid as being enough of a benefit to justify the increased price. But that might just make me.
No, I think there's probably three things that will change that over time. I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to buy a petrol engined car that isn't a mild hybrid.
Yeah, that's.
I think those regulations in cities are going to tighten.
Yeah.
So that they're at a level, but they're going to get tighter. And then the third one is that particularly as I think people are keeping cars longer than they did before. So there are definite fuel consumption advantages of a mild hybrid. So over the period of ownership, you may get back the premium cost of the mild hybrid, but it's
that's true.
It's not an advantage that kind of jumps out at you. I agree.
Yeah, and presumably, well, one would hope that they will continue with the taxation advantages and so on. Versus, at some stage, if you are driving a pure petrol or pure diesel car, the taxation versus a mild hybrid will be substantially different. I mean, it's already.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we can even predict that because I mean the current under the 24 regulations, I think, and someone will challenge these numbers. If it was pure electric, you paid no VED at all because it's an emissions tax and you've got no tailpipe emissions. It's a tailpipe emissions tax, CO2 production tax, and you haven't got any. And then under the current regulations, and I know for older cars, petrol engines get hammered because I have a 3.2 V6. Under the current regulations, you get hammered in the first year for emissions with a first year tax that ranges from £0 to £2,745 for being over £40,000 sticker price, which is pretty much every car that is a mild hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or a BEV. And then for years 2 to 5, you pay an additional £410. But then it settles down to a uniform taxation after that. So it already has ceased to be an emissions tax because in year 2, I think it was £180 flat rate for any car, plus that £410 for luxury cars, or £0 for BEVs. And it's now 190. And the BEVs have gone up to a tenner.
Yeah.
So there's still an advantage to BEV from a VED, TLA. Don't know how many more acronyms I can get into the sentence, but if you've got a battery electric vehicle, there's still an advantage in terms of the vehicle tax.
Yeah.
But I think that will potentially disappear. But who knows? There will be a general election at some point this year, and anybody who thinks they can predict what VED in 2026 is going to look like is a braver man than I am.
Yeah, quite so. Okay, well, I've taken us off down a bit of a path there on hybrids and so on. So sorry, let's get back to...
That's what the podcast's all about.
Boring people to tears. Yeah, okay. Well, we're doing that very well.
Well, tangents was what I meant, but
okay.
Some may share that view too. So that's what we know about powertrains. As we said earlier, there is a Larry 240 horsepower powertrain coming on the BEV side. If you assume that it's the same battery pack and it's the same battery technology, then I think the other assumption you can make is that the range is going to be substantially less, possibly, of the order of half of what it is with the 156 horsepower power plant. But we don't know that. We don't know what it's going to be.
With 156 horsepower, we're at 250 miles. So that might, as you say, assuming the battery packs and everything is all exactly the same, that could be 150 mile range, something of that order.
I think 150 is going to be kind of ambitious,
right? Okay.
For that. Well, which with fast charging is not the problem it was 5 years ago when it would have taken you 5 or 6 hours to recharge. It does mean that as long as you've got a charger at the destination, available at the destination, you've got a genuine 300-mile round trip range.
Yeah.
And if you're prepared to stop for 20 minutes, even if you're pessimistic about the 80% charge you can get in 20 minutes, that's a 230-mile each way range with a single stop, which would, that's 90% of journeys.
Yeah, I think so. Can I ask an unplanned question then. So you've got your plug-in hybrid Tonale.
Yep.
You presumably charge yours mostly at home as opposed to on long trips. But you went up to Spring Alpha Day recently. So what's your experience then of the charging network? Because we sort of glibly say, yeah, but it's fine if you don't mind waiting for 20 minutes to charge it. So I'm not experienced of this, but I'm kind of assuming, therefore, you can stop at a services halfway up the M1 and charge your car in 20 minutes. Is the infrastructure there? Is the cost of that comparable or less than filling up with petrol? Do you know what I mean? Are we sort of starting to see the evolution of the charging network infrastructure such that...
if I answer that last question first,
yeah,
and the answer is yes. So my short answer is it's a lot better than EV skeptics would have you believe. My long answer is it's an absolute mess.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of problems. One is there is no one charging infrastructure. So fast charging and conventional charging, or slow charging, if you like, are typically done from different charging points and have different connectors. So if you arrive and so the pub where we have our monthly owners club meeting has just installed 4 chargers.
Right.
They're all fast chargers, which will be great for a Junior, but useless for my Tonale because I can't fit the connector in my car.
Right. Okay.
So most cars that use a fast charger can also use a slow charger. So they have twice as many chargers available to them, but obviously the slow chargers are slow.
Yeah.
So in an emergency, you might have to wait longer, but you should be able to find a charge somewhere. In terms of mix, it's probably 30% fast chargers, 70% slow chargers.
Right. Okay.
Slow chargers are still twice as fast as charging from home from a 3-pin plug. So, it's 3 hours as opposed to 6 hours for a full charge on a Tonale, for example.
Yeah.
But that's a PHEV with a relatively small battery. You've got 300 miles range. That's going to take a lot longer. The other problem that's often overlooked is that there are many, many charging network operators who, almost without exception, require you to sign up to their network and either set up a direct debit or put your card details in, or in many cases, not just put your card details in, but preload your charging account with credit. Now, if there's 3 or 4 places you would go and recharge and they're all on different networks, that could mean you've got 30 quid tied up in pre-charges because you don't know which one you're going to use next. Yeah. I was at Yorkshire Wildlife Park for Spring Alpha Day. There were some chargers there, only half a dozen for all the visitors at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, but that's half a dozen more than there were the last time we went. I waited until one of those was available, stuck my car on it. It was a network I hadn't even heard of. Right. Fortunately, it allowed me to sign up online on the spot, put my card details in using Google Pay, and I was away. So I'd gone up there in normal mode or natural mode, so using power and not recharging the battery, because obviously if every time you self-charge, you're effectively using the petrol engine as a generator, so the economy is not ideal. Managed to use pure electric power for about 20% of the journey, averaged 42 miles to the gallon, mostly on motorways to get there, but arrived with 0 charge left from a full charge when I left home. Yeah. So I charged that overnight, and it cost me £6.05, which is kind of mid-priced public charger. It's 45p a kilowatt hour. And I think my domestic tariff's 29, something like that. So it's considerably more expensive than charging at home. And I haven't done the petrol equivalent calculation. Let's just do a quick E10 at the moment is about 148 a litre or something.
Yeah, it's something of that order. Yeah,
I'll edit some of this out so it's not quite as dull while I'm doing the calculation in the background. So it's £6.72. So it's not much cheaper. It's £6.72's worth of petrol for £6.05 effectively is the equivalent. Okay. So, it's not insignificant. It's 10%, isn't it? Pretty much 10% cheaper. But if I'd done that at home, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the way you describe the multiple charging network operators, that's become the norm now for parking anywhere. I've got 4 or 5 parking apps on my phone for the different places I visit for work, and when we went to Scotland, it was a different app for parking. So it's that sort of thing, although we don't have to charge up. You don't have to put money on the accounts for parking, so I suppose it's slightly different.
But and that's not true for all of the charging networks either, but it is for some of them.
Okay, but the way you describe it, I'll have to pay more attention when I go into the services to get my petrol, is it does feel like a workable, despite, the slight faff of different network operators, it feels like you can pull in off the motorway, fast charge a Junior for 20 minutes, and you'll have the best part of 180, 200 miles all good to go, sort of thing.
And you should expect when you're charging at a motorway service station that the cost of the charge is going to be disproportionately expensive in exactly the same way that the cost of the petrol is more expensive. So there will always be cheaper ways of doing it. One of the things that I got quite excited about with the Junior launch, I suppose it was actually the Milano launch, wasn't it? Anyway, while they were actually making the announcement, was they talked about the sat-nav having the ability to route you to chargers. And then I've always used Android Auto in my Tonale because the integration of, I play a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and stuff, and I quite like Google Maps. So I've just always used that. And it was only literally 2 days ago that I discovered that the sat-nav in the Tonale will also do that.
Oh, okay.
So that's not a new thing.
And how long have you had that car?
A year. No, not quite a year, 10 months. So yeah, I think you can start a journey and you can have the sat nav plan that journey and take you to charging points of your choice. And you can also get to the point where you've driven it a little bit harder and had the lights on more than you expected and had the heat turned up more than you expected and don't quite have the range you'd planned, and it will find you a charging point. And if you're half Scottish as I am and always looking for a bargain, you can say, okay, I'm on the motorway, but what I'll do is I'll get the sat nav to find me a charger which is off the motorway but not far enough. When I'm searching for petrol stations, I scroll through the list of petrol stations en route until I find a Tesco or an Asda, because I know that's 30p a litre cheaper than stopping at the services on the motorway. So you can do exactly the same thing with a charger.
Well, there's another little tangent we've gone on there, but again, for me, and perhaps this is just me and all of our listeners are thinking, I don't know why you're going on about this, but for me, it's a key thing when you're launching a new car that has a BEV version and a hybrid version that is a plug-in, that ability in the UK to make the concern about range anxiety go away is a fundamental thing, I think. I don't think I'm so abnormal that I'm different to many people. I would be concerned today buying an electric car with under a 200-mile range for the type of work driving I do, unless I had a really good level of confidence that there are at least 3 or 4 places on my 150-mile commute where I can absolutely stop and within 20 minutes or so be good to go again and get for the remainder of my journey. So I think these are important points. I think they're a big differentiator for decision making when you walk into a dealer or when you're thinking about an electric car for a lot of people. And even a lot of those people who absolutely aren't going to do 300 miles in a day, they still get anxiety about it, just for that once or twice a year when they might do that long trip to go on, a holiday or what have you. So I think these are important points, and I don't want to.
They are, although rationally, you'd be better buying a BEV and hiring a petrol car for the one time a year you go over 300 miles. But how many of us are actually truly rational?
No, quite so. Well, I'm certainly not.
Well, I've got an EV and a 3.2 V6 sitting on the drive.
So you're obviously mad as a March.
Yeah. But I feel much better about having the 3.2 V6. We were saying before we started on the podcast, I went to the theatre in Reading on Monday evening, got all the way there and back on electric power. So, for those who've not visited Reading, if you imagine somewhere that's got all the disadvantages of London and none of the advantages, the traffic's appalling. We were in a multi-storey car park coming out of a big event. So took 20 minutes to get from the top floor of the multi-storey out of the car park. And actually a significant proportion of the vehicles coming down the spiral ramp out of the multi-storey were BEVs. And it was a noticeably more pleasant experience than the last time I did that, when the whole of the column of the spiral exit was just full of secondhand fumes.
No, I think don't get me wrong. I don't want you to think I'm anti-electric. I'm absolutely not. I'm all for it. I just think today there's a substantial price differential and there's a level of concern and anxiety about range and so on that they are going to put some people off. And I consider myself one of those people. So I think everything that I've read and everything I understand about Junior makes it a hugely positive step forward for Alfa Romeo. And, if we can get the pricing right on it, I think it will. I mean, in the UK, it's probably not going to sell like hotcakes, but I think across Europe, it will. And I think that's a tremendous advantage for us and for the future of Alfa Romeo as well.
Yeah.
Just one thing. In Europe, it was mentioned at the launch, they have the Stellantis free-to-move e-solutions and so on. So they're sort of bundling in charging cards and wall boxes and things like that. Do you think that's going to be an option in the UK? Do you think they'll start bundling in some of the extra costs that we have to swallow in the UK, or do you think it's not going to be?
Would you like the official answer?
Oh, do you have an official answer?
I do have an official answer because I
should have read it then.
I asked that question. So
Okay.
let me see if I can find it. Okay, so this is the official statement, which I think was in the article in the magazine. The official statement is, we will have a partnership with Octopus, but the full details of this will be confirmed at a later date.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, they'll do something. I think with a lot of these things, there's always a balance with, a lot of other manufacturers have done free wall boxes as well. And the take-up's well below 100% because often the wall box is only a really good deal if you switch providers to the people that are providing the wall box, which is not always an option at the time you do it. I know the best way to charge an EV by far is to go on to a cheap overnight tariff and charge it at night.
Right. Okay.
And both the Tonale and the Junior and most EVs will allow you to schedule the charging. So you plug it in when you get home, but it doesn't start charging until the app tells it to start charging.
Yeah. Okay.
But I've looked into those, and because I work from home and use a lot of tech at home, the way most of the electricity providers recover the cost of the cheap electricity is they massively bump up your daytime electricity. So if you work in an office and you're out of the home all day and not using any electricity, they're a real bargain. Yeah. But if I switch to one of those just to get cheaper overnight EV charging, which I could reduce the cost of my EV charging by about a third, my overall electricity bill would go up by about 60%.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't work. So I not everybody will be able to or want to take advantage of a wall box deal.
Yeah.
But it will be there for people that it works for.
Okay. Right. Well, look, I've taken us off on another tangent again. So for the listeners who haven't switched off, should we talk about the look and the style of
We've got one more thing to talk about, and I'm not going to let you take us off on a tangent about this because we don't know. The other thing that we talked about on the launch podcast was we talked about performance, and we know a bit about that. We also talked a little bit about handling.
Yeah.
And we know it's been developed at Bolocco by the team that did the GTAM, and it should be good.
Yeah.
But what we haven't done is driven one or even read a report by anybody who's driven one.
No.
What I would say is if you look at the 600E and Avenger reviews, and I've driven both of those cars myself, they are perfectly good. Not best in class, but perfectly good in terms of the way they ride and handle. So I think any improvement on that is going to take it from average to above average in class to way above average in class. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing how much better it is. The 600E is optimized for road versus the Avenger, which has a more of an off-road bias. So 600E is a bit better, but this should be a qualitative improvement on 600E.
Yeah, and look, we need it to be really, really good, don't we? I think there's a lot of, maybe this is the bias of social media, that, the tiny minority who shout very loud seem to get their points across on social media more than the vast majority who are less fussed about these things. But the assumption being that it's a generic B segment SUV, it's going to be a bit wallowy, it's not going to handle it, it's going to be slow, blah, blah, blah. So our expectation is it's going to be none of those things. It's going to be really damn good. But we haven't got any proof of that. We haven't driven it, and no one on earth other than certain employees at Alfa Romeo have driven it. But we do need it to be good, I think. I think it's going to be, I will personally be very disappointed, and I'm sure lots of us will be, if we get in it, we drive it, and we think, oh yeah, it's just a tiny B segment SUV, it's a bit slow and it doesn't go around bends very well. Now I do not think it's going to be like that. I think it is going to be pretty special, because I think that team wouldn't have let it leave Bolocco without it ticking all the right boxes and being a really good handling car. So my expectations are high, but there's obviously the flip side, which is, okay, so if they don't meet the expectations, there's going to be some disappointment. But yeah, certainly I think it does need to be good. I don't think it's
I
not going
think
to be.
it's starting from a good place, and I think the likelihood is that it will be substantially better. The only risk is that it ends up being harsh or twitchy, or because they've overdone it trying to make it too sporty. But as you say, we won't know until we actually get to drive it. We do know what it looks like.
We do, and look, I didn't dislike it when I first saw it. There was a few quirks to it. I mean, chiefly the Scudetto, the front grille. That took a while to sink in. I have to say, it's grown on me even more. I am a fan. And I think, as we said in the last podcast, I think the problem we've got is there's a lot of Alfisti who do not like SUVs, and this is plainly an SUV. So we have to be able to differentiate between do we or do we not like an SUV? If we don't like the SUV, we're probably not going to like the Junior. If you're okay with SUVs or you accept that SUVs are the biggest selling segments on the planet, is the Junior a good enough and stylish enough and got enough about it to differentiate it from the competition? I think it has. I think, honestly, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I thought it was cool and I thought it was different, but I was a bit concerned about some of the bits and bobs on the car. I have grown to really, really like it now. And the more I look at it, the happier I think I would be buying one. And that's quite a thing for someone like me who's frankly very, very tight with money and doesn't like to, I've only bought one new Alfa Romeo in the last 10 years. So I'm not Alfa Romeo's target, customer who swaps their car in every 3 years. I tend to buy it, finance half of it or less, and keep it forever or a long time. So I think I would buy one of these. I have to say, I really, really like the look of it now, excepting it's an SUV, and I want a Mito replacement that's a little 2-door, 3-door car, not an SUV. However, I don't think we're going to see one of those for a decade. I think this is a really good looking car, and I think if they get the handling, pricing, blah blah, all in alignment, I could definitely see me buying one of these.
Yeah, I think I'm in more or less the same place. I think I do like it more than I did when I first saw it. I think if I'm disappointed, it's when I look at the Jeep Avenger is not a conventional 2020s styled modern for the sake of it SUV. You look at the 600e and it is very obviously a Fiat 500 family car.
Yeah.
So somebody at Alfa Romeo took a deliberate decision to go for funky ultra modern 2020s SUV as their starting point. And there's part of me that's disappointed by that, but there's also part of me that says there's a reason why there are so many cars that have taken that approach, and that's because people are buying them.
Yeah.
Having that as a starting point, every time I look at it, I see new little details, and I just think, given that that's where they started from, they've done an amazingly good job. The Biscione on the C-pillar and the air vents, and I'm one of the few people who actually really like the Scudetto. I prefer the modern Scudetto to the retro mesh and Alfa Romeo script version, although I like that as well. I just think it's bold and brave and beautifully detailed, and it's an SUV.
I mean, and that grille has grown on me, the modern equivalent. I sort of took the view of, oh, thank God they've got a mesh version with the Alfa Romeo script, so I can still buy one. But I want to see it in the flesh. But I suspect when I see one in the flesh, I'll really like the modern grille. I'm not 100% there yet, but it's definitely grown on me in the last few weeks. I can now look at pictures and my eye isn't immediately drawn to that aspect of the car. I can see it more as a whole, and I'm hoping other people will be feeling the same. And the same with the wheels as well. Those
I'm still not convinced about the wheels.
Oh, okay.
I'm not.
Swings and roundabouts. So. Those sort of 90-degree clovers. That's grown on me as well. I
I think they're fitting. Big, bold, brave design. I think they absolutely are that. It's just not quite my thing. The interesting thing about, you say your eyes no longer immediately drawn to and put off by the Scudetto. There were a couple of renders in the days before that had, after that white prototype test mule photos were leaked, there were a couple showing a red car with a carbon Scudetto, which obviously stands out even more. And I think that looks stunning. So I'm hoping that's either, if that's not an option, Koshi will have a version of that out within a couple of days that you can have as an aftermarket version. And I think that actually making it a centerpiece.
I also think the interior the more I look at the interior, the more that's really grown on me. That looks like a really nice place to be. If the materials feel as they look, I think it'll be a really nice interior. I love the seats. I love the optional side belt seats. I've always been a fan of the side belt seats. I've just never really fitted in them in the Mito. So, but looks wise, I think they look glorious. I think the pack that includes those seats is probably $2,500 or something like that. So look, they're not cheap. But I think even the standard seats, they've got the sort of intertwined red and black material that had on the Tonale. I think they're lovely. They're not trying to, on the configurator, I don't know if anybody's tried this, but on the Italian Alfa site, you can go and configure your Tonale. They're not trying to stiff you with loads of options.
You can definitely configure your Tonale, but the Junior, you can configure.
Yes, Junior as well. You can also do a Junior. Yeah, they've not tried to get you to add hundreds of different options. They basically added a couple of packs and you pick your color and there you go. And I think that is a really cool way of doing it, which broadly speaking means they've included quite a lot into at least this launch edition Speciale. It seems quite good value, I think. I think the color options as well, they've grown on me. They looked okay on the launch. But if you play on the Italian configurator for the Junior, you'll see the different colors. And they've got this sort of bi-color or two-tone where you have a black roof and different body color. You could waste a good hour configuring different versions of your Junior on the Italian Alfa Romeo site. And I have done. And I think they're cool and they're modern and they're different as well. So I think they have really sort of thought through the look and feel of the exterior and the interior, the sort of ambience that you'll have in a car. And it's modern. Yes, it's very different. It's actually quite different to Tonale, I think, in terms of some of the details that they put in there, some additional things. But yeah, I'll go back to the point. I could see me buying one of these, and I was very much in two minds at launch. It's grown on me much more. Obviously, I want to see it in the flesh, but I could see me actually taking my wallet out and buying one of these now. And I think that's, I mean, the only is it a problem? I suppose the only thing worth noting is it's not really aimed at me and you, is it? We're sort of old and, Alfisty, and we're biased, and we know the history and the legacy, and we know what we love, and we love big engines and blah, blah. So it's kind of not aimed at us, but I think if they could sell it to us, they could certainly sell it to younger people and the sort of market that they're aiming for. But yeah, I suppose, the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced I probably could buy it, but I'm not the person that Alfa are trying to sell this car to, I suppose.
Yeah. The black roof option is quite interesting because the Brera red version with the black roof has even more of the look of an SZ about it than it does normally. Just looking at one online now, looks really rather nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm in a position where I'm 1 year into a 4-year lease on the Tonale, so I'm not going to be buying one anytime soon. But my wife has a 2009 Fiat 500 that has to go at some point before it finally collapses in on itself. And I think I can probably persuade her to buy one. The only problem there is that she has a fundamental rule in car purchasing, which is part of the reason we still have a 2009 Fiat 500, which is that it has to be yellow. So I desperately need Alfa to come out with a yellow version of it, which I actually think would look stunning.
Yeah, nice Zoe Yellow Junior. That would be great.
No, not Zoe Yellow, proper yellow.
Oh, careful.
I know there are lots of fans of Zoe Yellow.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
I'm one of them, even though I don't own one. Well, I mean, it won't surprise you to know that my Mitos and my Sud are all paid for. But, I mean, in reality, it will come down to the price. So at the premiere, Imperato was very clear that it'll be under 30,000 euros, or there'll be a version under 30,000 euros. And on the configurator, there is a version under 30,000 euros. As soon as you change the paint color, of course, it goes straight over 30,000. But yeah, it'll be depending on pricing over here, I suppose. Because I think under 30,000, even if you then add all the options and all the stuff and you end up paying 40, there's a nice feeling going into a dealer looking at a car that's the price of which starts with the numbers 29. I think on the Jeep Avenger they sort of start around the 24,000, which is probably just for the petrol non-hybrid.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have one of those. But yeah, if they can get it under 30,000, and if I could get one of those, finance half of it or something, it would be very appealing. But not at 40 grand. Do you know what I mean?
No, and of course at the moment there are very good reasons to take the £30,000 version and spec it up to no more than 39,980, I think, to avoid that luxury car tax. Or car tax, as it effectively is. I think someone quoted the other day, 75% of the market in terms of sales are now 40k plus.
Right. Yeah.
So if you can creep under that and get a spec you like, I think there will be one in the Swarbrick family at some point. May not be in the first couple of years, but I do like it.
Yeah, I certainly. Yeah, I'm sold on it. Subject to seeing it in the flesh. I think it's
subject to driving it is my caveat.
Well, yeah, but
because I've never known an Alfa yet that doesn't look better in the metal than it does in photos. So given that I like it in photos, I'm reasonably confident that I'll love it in the flesh. But it's got to drive nicely as well.
Yeah, I'm. Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe I shouldn't confess to this. I'm almost less bothered about that because throughout my life I've always wanted the best handling, and if that means I have to modify the car and what have you to get handling better, fine, and so be it, at whatever cost. And these days I sort of think, well, when do I use the car? It drives to and from work. It bimbles around town. I go to and from Alfa Romeo events, and I'll do 1, maybe 2 goes on a track a year. So I'm almost in the position where it doesn't have to be brilliant, but it has to be good. Otherwise, it will just annoy me every single day.
Good is the absolute minimum.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let's see when we drive it, but yeah, I do wonder if I'm more relaxed about it now. But 10 years ago, I would have been absolutely. If it doesn't handle like it's on rails, I'm really not interested. Whereas now, I'm not sure. Some of the cars, even, some of the Mitos I've owned, I've put stiff suspension on those cars, and I absolutely wouldn't want to be using that as my daily car now.
Yeah.
So I think it is probably just getting old, actually.
Well, I think one of the nice things about working at home most of the time is my daily car isn't driven daily.
No.
So when I do have to go somewhere, I'm quite happy to leave 20 minutes earlier and take a scenic route and enjoy the drive. I've been doing some work in Maidenhead, which is 12 miles away, but I've been taking an 18-mile route to get there to avoid the M4 and actually enjoy the commute. So I think handling's still up there for me. But Cool. I think we've probably bored people senseless for about twice as long as a normal podcast. Even though we're revisiting the same subject.
I was going to say, I'd be very surprised if anyone's still listening, to be honest. So if you are still listening, congratulations and thank you for your loyal support and putting up with us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, David, and look forward to speaking to you again.
All right, see you soon, guys. Bye for now.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that rambling update on the Junior. We'll be back in 4 weeks' time on Sunday the 2nd of June, when we'll be looking at what it takes to become a racing driver with novice and friend of the podcast, Jamie Porter. Episode 96 will be available to download from 1:30 p.m. from iTunes, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Spotify, the club's website, and everywhere else good podcasts are found. Until then, stay safe.